welcome everyone. We're gonna get going. My name is Craig Rosenberg. I'm the Chief Platform Officer at Scale Venture Partners. And David will be able to really introduce himself when I hand over the presentation, but I'm here today with my good buddy, longtime buddy, we realized today, David Dulany, who's been spending almost his whole career in pipeline generation, SDR, and has been putting it to work for lots of people at Tenbound, which I can tell you about in a second. So I'm really excited about today. I did want to just give you guys a brief overview about us. We are the sponsors of today's event, and my team, as the Chief Platform Officer, we work with the portfolio to enable them to move from founder sales to hypergrowth go-to-market machines. But we also want to help the entire world of software and tech, and that's why we open up these events for people outside of the portfolio to be able to go out there and share and make the go-to-market a better place. But what we do is we have essentially a network of expertise. We have advisors, we have executives in residence, we have people in-house, and we use that to do a number of things. So one is we advise our portfolio and others on their critical challenges in the go-to-market. We create content, and we have educational networking events, which is one of the major announcements today. We will be hosting on September 13th of Dreamforce. We have a go-to-market lounge, which will be about 6 minutes outside of Moscone. So for those of you in the Bay Area or going to Dreamforce, you're welcome to join us. And Laura will put the URL in there so that we're asking people to register just so we have a feel for the number of people. We've had a ton of signups, and we'd love to have anybody in the go-to-market come. David will be there hanging out as well. So you'll look for the URL in both the chat, and then after today's event, we'll include that as well. Okay. So I'm just want to give one setup, and then I'm going to just hand it to you, David. And then David, when you need to move slides, just let me know. So I mentioned before, David's been in the pipeline building SDR game for a long time. And now his company Tenbound basically works with hundreds, if not thousands, over the years of SDR teams and go-to-market leaders on optimizing SDR. And so we talked about what we want to talk about for this webinar. And goal setting was one that David hears a lot and I hear a lot, so it was perfect. So we sort of hit the mark here, and that's why we decided to do the presentation that we're doing today. There will be a recording. You will be able to get the deck. You will be able to follow up with David. So all of those questions on the table. This is for many of you, if you've seen David before, this is just another piece of education from him. Those of you who are meeting him for the first time, this is just the beginning of your relationship with him. So with that, I'm very excited to hand the ball to you, David. I'm going to go on mute, and then I'll come back on. If you have questions, anybody just put it in the Q&A, and I might stop David. We have some areas where you might want to ask some questions. Just feel free to pop them in or make a comment, and we'll address them. Yeah, with that, David, to you, my good friend.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Craig. And it would be helpful if you could put your level in the organization in the chat, and so we can make sure that we talk to the specific issues that you're bringing, because as you know, sales development is cross-departmental. There's a lot of dotted lines, and the sales development leader has a really, really tough job in making sure that they're connecting the dots, and they're working with people that they don't necessarily report to, or that they don't report to them either. They're kind of in the middle ground. And so when we hear from companies, it usually has to do with a sales development team that lost their manager recently, or it's a CMO or a VP of sales that inherited the sales development team, and they're kind of like, what's next? What's next for the team? They're performing well, but we need to stabilize and really understand how to optimize, or they're not performing well and they need help right now. And so we come at it from a lot of different angles. Obviously, on the executive level, how do you optimize performance of the team? middle management level with the sales development managers, how do you work across departmentally to make it happen? And then obviously the SDRs, there's an unlimited amount of training and coaching that goes into working with the SDRs. Before doing this, we started Tenbound 7 years ago, but before that, I was running SDR programs at various tech companies, and that's actually how I met Craig. You see patterns come up over and over with this program, even though sales development is not a new practice, relatively. It's definitely still a big challenge for companies to get right. And so we want to take it from the angle that's most valuable to you. And one of the things that we thought about is goal setting is so critical for this program. And it a lot of times it's, I wouldn't say mishandled, but it's just not given enough focus on, that it really deserves and needs. So we're going to dive into best practices on setting goals for the sales development program, and then making sure, especially if you're an SDR leader, how do you make sure that you hit your number consistently? So, and Craig, if you hear of any comments or anything that comes up in the chat, I want to make this as interactive as possible. So feel free, at any time to post those or dive in. So, yeah. That's us. And, I knew Craig initially as the funnel-holic, and I think that that's a great way to think about it. I had never heard that term before, but he truly is, I don't know. Are you still a funnel-holic, or are you recovering at this point?
I've been getting texts from people. I guess I didn't renew the URL. Don't buy it. Don't snake me. I got to get on, snipe me, or whatever they call it. I got to go on and go renew it. But no, I mean, my Twitter handle's still funnel-holic and all that, but I haven't necessarily retired it, but thank you for asking. It's not so much of my identity, but I appreciate it.
I think it's more the go-to-market holic now, because the go-to-market is a better term to think of the whole thing holistically. So good. All right, that's us. So let's dive in. So first and foremost, why is this important? And we'll talk a bit about that. What's the usual way of setting goals right now for the SDR team? A better way to think about it, some specifics on how to, and then some things to watch out for, and a few action items to take from the webinar. So let's dive in. Why are we talking about this in the first place? If you think about it, once you have your goal set, the behaviors and activities of yourself and the team are going to follow the goals, and you're going to be trying to hit the goals. So obviously, if the goals are not thought through correctly and they're wrong, you might end up working extremely hard, and hitting something that isn't even necessarily relevant to the business and helpful to the company. So you've got to make sure that you have the right goals in place, and so that your ladder is leaned up against the right building, because you might get to the top and you realize that you've completely missed. Obviously, the wrong goals, I mean, I don't think you'd be on this webinar if you didn't know they cause a lot of issues. You could have the wrong activities happening. You could, not be as efficient as possible and cause a lot of burnout for absolutely no reason. Obviously, the sales development program is extremely capital intensive. And, if you're spinning your wheels on something that's not relevant to the business, then that's going to cause a lot of issues. And really, your job security and career opportunities depend obviously on hitting your goals, consistently as you're working for the company, but then hitting the right goals that make a meaningful impact on the business, and really make sure that you can expand the value that you're bringing as a sales development leader to the company. So that's why we're talking about this. And as I mentioned, you find yourself as an SDR leader, and this is one of the main struggles that we find is many SDR leaders come up through the ranks of the organization as amazing SDRs or amazing, inside salespeople, and they show some leadership ability, and then they get promoted to become an SDR manager, which is great, and it's a great career path. The one thing that we see, SDR managers over indexing on is managing down, and not in a pejorative way, but working really closely with the SDRs and on the recruiting, the training, the onboarding, the playbook, everything that goes into up leveling the team, obviously, because there's so much work that goes into that, and they were an SDR just a year or two ago. Where they miss and they start to struggle a lot is the cross-departmental relationships that you have to build in order to be an effective SDR leader, and then definitely not thinking enough about how you manage up to the executives at your company, because obviously they're your boss, to the to some extent, even though there might be some levels in between. But the SDR function is so critical to the success of the overall go-to-market strategy, that it's very, very important that you're in lockstep and managing to the future aspirations of the people above you. And so couple of recommendations. Obviously, HBR is a book. I had bought this like 11 years ago, and it's sitting on my shelf. It's a great way to think about how do you work cross-departmentally and up. And then we actually, in our book, the Sales Development Framework, have a whole section on how to work up and across in the organization. And goal setting is one of the most important, aspects in making sure that you establish that relationship. So, usual way, and tell me, in the chat if this ever comes up, or you have some sort of experience in this area. So, somewhere in a smoky back room, the CEO and CFO are setting the revenue goals for the year and then breaking it down to the quarter, and they do a magical calculation. Sometimes it's 3x, sometimes it's 4x to the pipeline, and they come up with a number, and then they give that to the sales leader, who then, in most cases, the SDR organization will bubble up to. I think in the last research, it was like 70% of SDR programs work for the sales leader, and then the sales leader breaks it down into a quarterly pipeline goal and gives it to the SDR leader. So you're sitting there going, okay, I got this. I don't really understand the logic behind the goal. I'm not really sure how this goal was created, and now I have a goal, and it's on me to reach this with the resources and the people that I have at my disposal. And so you're sitting there going, one thing that happens as well with SDR teams is it becomes sort of a hot potato, in that nobody knows really where it should report. Should it go to marketing? Should it go to sales? How do we, should we create a pipeline goal using marketing metrics, or is it what the sales team needs in order to hit their number? And so, especially if the senior executives of the company have never run a sales development program, there's a lot of confusion, and it just sort of gets passed around. So that's the usual way that we see it happening. And so what's missing? Some of the things that I talked about is, first and foremost, are these goals realistic? You're looking at the top end of the funnel, which is the campaigns that are planned to be able to support the pipeline goal. You're looking lower on the funnel, in that the mouths to feed on the sales team. How many people are on the sales team that are waiting for the appointments for the SDR program? And then you're looking at your resources. Do you have the number of people that you need? Do you have the tools that are available? Do you have good data, et cetera? And what are we really focusing this on? Do we have any historical performance of what the SDR program has been able to produce up to this date that we can base this on? And then, bigger picture, what is there an ROI for the SDR program right now, or is it purely a sunk cost to try to get our name out there in the marketplace and start to set up meetings? So there's a lot of questions that come up, and what we see often is SDR managers will, passively accept the goals that are handed down from on high, and then get to work to start to hit them because that's their job. That's what they're there for. But it's, a little bit more nuanced, and then it's actually a great opportunity for the folks on the call to be more involved in this. So here's a better way. And so this is where you start to work cross-departmentally and start to connect the dots, even if you don't necessarily have a direct line relationship. The CEO and CFO are still back, behind closed doors, setting the revenue goals for the quarter. And that's a higher level conversation that we can really get into, because they're getting those probably from the investors like Craig who want a certain amount of money to come out this quarter. So they're creating those goals. But a better way to look at that is the marketing leader looks at the pipeline forecast based on the conversion rates and campaigns that they have planned, and gives a realistic number of what the pipeline actually is. And there's a layer of the funnel where the marketing leader should really know, based on what we have in place right now and what we have planned, here's a somewhat accurate forecast of what pipeline we're rolling into the quarter with. Okay, so we have that. Next, the SDR leader looks at their historic averages, looks at the amount of people that they have in the seat, and the ramp level of their team, how long it's taking to close, and then specific campaigns and pipelines that they have planned, and how that coordinates with the marketing team. And they look at those historic averages and they go, okay, I feel like, and if anyone's ever been a sales rep, this is what we had to do, every quarter. Based on what I have and the resources that I have available, the campaigns that I'm seeing above the in the pipeline, what's coming down the line, and how long it takes to close deals, here's a accurate goal setting forecast that I can sign on to. And then finally, the sales leader will take the marketing assumptions, they'll take the SDR assumptions, look at it, probably, shave off, make it more realistic. And now we have an accurate pipeline and revenue goal to roll into the quarter. And it might look completely different than the usual way that people do it, because it's not, for lack of a better word, it's not just like something somebody made up at the top level and handed down to the people below. So here's some more detail about how to think about this. So you'll get like I said, you can't necessarily argue against the revenue goal and timeline, because it is what it is. It's like if we need to make this much money within the quarter, that's coming from a level above this conversation. But there's a lot that we can do to start to double click and analyze that. You want to look at the historic conversion rates of how many accounts, contacts, and meetings it takes to hit that pipeline number. You want to be able to calculate the average pipeline per meeting that you need, and then how many activities go into setting one of those meetings. And then based on that, do you have enough SDRs? Do you have enough ramped SDRs? And do you have enough of the data and activities planned in your database to be able to hit those activity numbers, which then go into the pipeline number on the meetings that you're setting? And finally, based on this, do you have enough pipeline to hit the number that's coming down from the executive team? And you may, and this is, I don't want to have you sit there in a spreadsheet all day doing this. I mean, it really doesn't take that much time once you get it going. But you may look at this analysis and say, you know, our goal is X. And based on the resources and the people and the tools that we have right now, there's just no way that we're going to be able to make this. So we need to have a tough conversation on, you know, resource allocation, hiring, training, and you know, being able to get closer to this before we go into the quarter versus looking at it retroactively and going, what happened?
Sorry, I was on mute. David, on the ramp level though, if in absence of a spreadsheet, so how should people look at that? So you're looking at it over time and you're trying to figure out how much you'll actually get out of people within that sort of time frame where you're trying to hit the revenue goals. I mean, or the SDR meeting goals or whatever that might be. Can you just talk a little more about that?
Yeah. So if you think about it, not all SDRs are the same. You've got high, I mean, there's like a bell curve kind of the ability of the team to hit the number. And so if you've got a bunch of people that are in that sweet spot, they've been in the seat for, you know, 2 or 3 quarters, they're hitting the number regularly. Everybody seems, you know, pretty happy with how everything's going. And with a little bit more training and coaching, you can start to push them into sort of the A player range. Then that's going to be a completely different situation to where we've got a large range of people across skill development and attitude. And we need to hire 4 more people and get them ramped up. And, you know, one guy is thinking about quitting next week, and we know that he's on his way out. He's on a PIP, for example. And you know, it's a fluid situation. So you've got to take that into account when you're creating the meeting goal. Yeah. And so here's a few things to think about. We get, especially in the SDR world, we get super focused on what's happening today. Do we have enough meetings? Do we have enough, you know, did we make enough calls? Do we have enough, you know, pipeline right now? But if you can elongate your thinking at least to 90-day sprints, it seems like the human ability for paying attention and getting excited and, you know, having, you know, the motivation to be able to execute on this is about 90 days. So you really want to get into a 90-day thinking pattern of the quarters coming up. It's you know, now I can't think of it, September, October, November, it's something like that. October, November, December, the quarter's coming up. Okay, now we're looking at September. So we need to start to think about the goal setting for October, November, December right now at the end of August. And, you know, obviously if you're new to the business world and this is new, it's not something that comes naturally. But you need to start to think in 90-day sprints and then planning about a month before and starting to pull together this information for when you get the initial number from the high-level executives. Then the next thing, and good, we got some comments. The next thing that's coming in is, does everybody agree on all the definitions? This takes a lot of work, but it's really important, you know, baseline for making sure that everyone's talking the same language. Because if you're working across departmentally with marketing people and salespeople and the executives and the SDRs, you've got to make sure that you've got a basic definitional understanding of the terms that you're using. Because if you're saying we're going to get QSOs and the marketing team saying SQLs and the sales team is saying, something SOLs, something like that, then it just creates this big mess, and it's almost impossible to set, solid goals. Last two quick things.
By the way, I would mention one thing on that.
Sure.
Is that there's like this maturity curve on those definitions, right? There's the people that didn't do any sort of syncing of that, which is ugly, as you know, right? Because that's the one where you get SDR team sucks, love the SDR team, right? Because everyone's doing their own things. Then you've got sort of level 2 where they make the SDR qualified lead definition, and that's pretty solid. Maybe what a good account is, etc. But they don't define an opportunity. They don't define like what should go into the sales forecast pipeline, etc. And that still leaves this big hole because now we've not set the expectation on what's actually going to go in there, and that's often a hidden killer. I've found, right, which is like you sort of leaving the decision on what's an opportunity to each rep and their preferences, and you got one who won't put anything in there unless there's a month it's going to close in the next month, and then the rest that are willing to put everything in there. That's another definitional area, and it does have an effect on SDR teams and marketing teams for sure.
Yeah, and this is, believe me, easier said than done. And I'm working with one, like, I won't say the name of the company, but great company, great product, doing really, really well in a very tough market. They have a wonderful executive team and marketing team, SDR team, sales team. All the leadership is completely aligned. And we still have a really hard time getting all on the same page with the definitions, blessing the definitions, and moving forward as one, unified go-to-market team. So, imagine if you're a dysfunctional team and, you're an SDR manager trying to herd cats, basically. It's really tough, but it's so critical because, everything else rolls out from it. So the other couple things to think about is the timing. This is really, really important because if you're saying we're going to hit X pipeline number, which is going to convert to X revenue number by the end of this quarter, then you can see how important it is. The first question that I ask when I'm working with companies is, how long does it take on historical average, based on the size of the deals to close? And that's unique to every company. But can you give me a ballpark? Is it a month? Is it a week? Is it a quarter? For some huge companies, it's like a year or more. But you've got to be able to know that the time it takes on historic average so that you can be able to really plan and set your goals. And then we talked about this, but really think about like the SDR team. It's and this is why it's another hats off to SDR managers, because it's a fluid situation. You do your best to hire the best people. You give them all the tools and resources, and you put a ton of time into training and coaching. But at the same time, after 12 to 18 months, they want a promotion, or they looking at different parts of your organization, or they just got a better offer for 10K more, and they can work anytime they want. It's a really hard, fluid situation. So you got to take that month before the quarter starts, you got to take a really hard look and try to kind of look into a crystal ball. Who is solid right now, who is one of our top performers, who's on their way out. Do we need to hire some more people? Because that all comes into the goal setting process. Okay. So this is what and like I said, easier said than done, and it takes a long time to be able to do this. But you want really to be partner with the executive team and use realistic assumptions when you're creating goals for this program. And they call it like a seat at the table. And, it takes confidence and it takes wisdom and all these things. But you also have to remember that the sales development program is critical to be able to build predictable pipeline, right? I think there's one book called Predictable Pipeline, but there's predictable revenue too. It's a critical function, and you deserve a seat at the table. And it's important to have that confidence when you're going in to create this with the executive team. Use data as your guide. Everybody's got an opinion, but data, bring me some data. Let me see what some of these metrics are and where you're getting these assumptions. And if you can get ahead of it and let them know there's no way that we're going to be able to do this, you want to have that conversation before, and so you can actually control something about it. And then finally, okay, magic wand, you're doing all this, you're implementing everything that we're saying. You have real, solid goals that are aligned with the company. Everyone's working. You got to hit the goal and hit it over and over and over, quarter after quarter. And that's how you build your reputation. It's a very small community of SDR leaders and great SDR leaders. And it's like supply and demand. I mean, there's very, very few in our industry that can do this over and over and over again. And they are really in demand leaders. So if you can do this, you're in good shape. And then finally, I misquoted this. It's actually, don't separate the gorillas from the bananas. And this is by our good friend here, Craig Rosenberg. And so what I mean by that, I always talk about this with my clients. Have the confidence, have the data, understand the resources that are available to you, and the power that you bring to these conversations, and don't let anything get between you and your goal. In a nice way. You don't have to be a jerk about it, but you're going to get a lot of no's, and we're all used to that being SDRs. People are going to say no. The executives are going to say no. The marketing team's going to say no. The sales team's going to say no, and it's scary and intimidating. But at the end of the day, they're going to come back to you as the leader and see, did we hit our goal consistently, and did we make our number? And nowadays, was it efficient? Did we do it in an efficient way? And if you didn't, then you're the one that's in trouble. So, be obsessed with this because it's worth it. Okay. So I'll see you. I'll see everybody at Dreamforce and the various other Bay Area events. We're also doing a virtual conference where we're going to be talking about this very topic of revenue alignment, getting everybody on the same page. And we've got Travis and Hillary from Snowflake, who just wrote a book called Busting Silos, where they explain exactly how they created this at Snowflake. And obviously that's been a big success story. So we'll shoot a link out and get everybody on board for that as well, Craig.
Awesome. Well, thank you, David. Let's start with Jess's question that she asked early. I wasn't sure whether to stop you or not, but it's a good one. And by the way, if anybody else wants to put anything in the chat or the Q&A, please do. So what's the estimated % of marketing team's contribution it takes to help the sales team to ensure the SDR team success? I think I would take out the help the sales team. So I would say the marketing team's contribution ensure the SDR team's success. Well, how would you answer that?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, so think of a pie chart, and if you divide it into 4 parts, just for the sake of this example, you've got the marketing these are the contribution to pipeline. You've got the marketing contribution, you've got the SDR contribution, you have the sales team contribution, and then you have referrals and current customers and things like that who are renewing, or you're getting that additional pipeline. And so that in that example, there's a 1/4 of each is responsible for the pipeline. But that doesn't necessarily hold true at most companies. Some companies, marketing is responsible for 50% of the pipeline, and the SDR is only 25%. The sales team, maybe it's just a sliver at 10%, and then all the other stuff is significantly less. So it depends a lot on also the go-to-market strategy. So you might have a product-led growth company where they're getting a lot of trials, and the marketing team is much more responsible for building the pipeline than the SDRs. If you're in a pure sales-led growth motion, then the SDRs and the sales team might do 50%, and then marketing is just a 25% of that.
Yeah. Now this has been a while for me, but like we did some of this at Topo looking at, and it depended, like you said, on the market, right? What we found was like as at Topo, we broke things by ACV. So if by deal size, we felt like deal size told us was the best way for us to be able to have a standardization around how we looked at data. So if you took like the small deal size, which ultimately was SMB, marketing was like 80 to 90%. I mean, the numbers were absurd for successful companies.
Yeah.
And then mid-market was like marketing was delivering like a 50, in some cases higher percentage, depending on how they define mid-market. And then enterprise was like 30. So it was like this curve, right? The size of the funnel mattered. If it was a big funnel, because SMB has all of these different potential opportunities for people to click, then yeah, that would be more of a bigger marketing contribution. And then as the funnel got tighter, and like ABM and like some of these like highly verticalized target markets, it's hard to get a high percentage of marketing contribution there. And so that's another sort of dependency. So we used to say the size of your funnel dictates the where the pipeline is going to come from. So I haven't done it since in the new sort of post-pandemic world that we live in today to look at what those percentages look like, but that's what it was pre.
Yeah. I mean, and it's controversial, I guess, in our silly little world that we're in, but I really advocate the SDR team to sit in the marketing department, and especially if you have a passionate CMO who has experience. Maybe they were an SDR at some point in their career, but they really understand how the function works. And you can quote me, ultimately the SDR team is a marketing channel, and they're just a little bit further down the funnel, and they should really be in lockstep with the marketing department on all the campaigns and everything like that. And I understand that's controversial. We'll do another webinar about that, but that's just my 2 cents on that.
Well, so what I would say is, in a perfect world, in my opinion, marketing delivers pipeline, and we don't split that up. So like that would mean that they would need to own SDRs, and when the organizational aptitude is there, it's better. It is that like marketing and SDRs are a combined opportunity creation machine. The only thing that anybody's ever argued with me about, and by the way, I work primarily with sales, but I can tell you right now, like I have sales leaders I work with right now who used to own SDRs and probably 4 years ago would have said, hell no, you can't have them. And then it got pulled away and they got it sent back to them. They're like, I don't want them. I just want to focus on closing business, because the experience when it's run well is incredible for the sales leader, right? Because then they can really focus the team on bringing home deals. But the issue, so going back to the thing that I remember putting this up on my blog, which is now out of business. I'll have to figure that out. But he was like, people would come on and say, well, they're going to go into sales, so they should be in the sales org. Like, oh, so let's not optimize. Like, let's do that because they're going to go into sales. Because by the way, even when they're in the marketing department, they still go into sales. I mean, that was just the most ridiculous argument for this. But the issue is, the marketing organization has to put the resources in. So there is a level of understanding. What I've seen so far is it works great because marketing knows how to buy technology and, buy resources. They have agencies, et cetera, to make people successful. So generally speaking, that's not an issue, but that will be one for either side because it does take resources for these SDR teams to really hum. So I think it's controversial. Yeah, it is. But I think there's more data that tells us that when run correctly with a CMO that understands it, that just creating an opportunity machine in that perfect dividing line is the best way to go. So I would agree with you, dude.
Yeah. And you hear a lot about, well, they need mentorship and they need training from the sales reps and stuff like that, which is totally true. But the sales reps want a meeting, a qualified meeting, and they want to talk to customers and, and run deals and stuff like that. So some of them are very interested in training SDRs and mentoring and stuff like that, but others aren't. So you have this uneven pattern. They just kind of want the production that comes from the team at the end of the day. And
but that's not even
enablement. Have a sales SDR enablement and train them so that they're ready to become salespeople when they want to. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, but that's also a ridiculous argument. That like somehow if they're in another group, they can't still meet with their sales team and learn from their sales reps. I mean, yeah, you can do that. And by the way, they learn so they do learn a lot from sales. They do better when they have a really good relationship with sales, but that's not a reason to keep it. That's also very doable when it's cross group. But you're right. We could probably spend way too much time on this. So the when I go back, can we just go back really quick? Because I didn't want to stop you here on the metrics. Hi everyone, just bear with me here. So what you were saying, sort of, this isn't, you're right, this is not complicated, which is good, by the way. And then you are creating this sort of methodology. How often are you looking at it? Are you managing into these? Is this just part of the planning exercise? Any other thoughts on sort of how these metrics sort of live on in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, I mean, so they're part of the planning process for sure. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy. One thing I see people get kind of stopped on is we need a dashboard or we need everything to plug in, so it's automated and stuff like that. And you could do this with a spreadsheet, and you just need to get the data from the CRM or your sales engagement platform and be able to put it in and manipulate it. And so you definitely have to do this before, in that month leading up to the quarter. And so when you get the goal, the initial goal, you can just see if it's even in the possible, realm of reality, based on the people and the resources that you have. And so that you can start to have that conversation. And then, maybe you're updating it, once a month, so that it's not completely cold when you go back in to do it the next quarter.
Yep. All right. Did you see Jess had another question in the chat, David? What are the average SAL, SQL turnaround time amongst inbound SDRs versus outbound SDRs in a combination of both across most industries? What is?
Okay. So this goes back to definitions. So inbound and outbound, first of all, are completely different. They're going to have wildly different averages, obviously. And so it's going to be higher on inbound than outbound. Industry average, I don't know offhand, but I would definitely look at it from the perspective that with inbound, they're actually raising their hand. They might not be the right account or contact that you want to talk to, but they're actually voluntarily coming to you. Outbound, it's completely cold. So there's going to be a lot more targeting available, but you know, you're going to have to talk to like 100 people to get one person to respond.
Awesome. All right. So, but by the way, I'll just go back to your contact slide. So, you know, if Jess or anybody that has more questions, you guys can follow up with David, right? Although it is a little scary, David, it says sales@tenbound.com. So they're going to come in with a question and someone's going to sell them something. No, it's a safe spot. And yes, for everyone who asked, again, we'll send you everything from today via email afterwards, so you have copies. But otherwise, David, I thank you very much for this very specific area of SDR, and frankly, even outbound sort of sales prospecting planning. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise, and hopefully looking forward to hanging out at Dreamforce and at the Revenue Alignment Conference, and seeing you again soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.